I notice you're one of the few people who maintained a critical faculty, even in the midst of the hysteria. And,
which hysteria?
The Ron Paul hysteria.
Oh,
So that's what it
yes.
is. It's a cult.
Yes. No, I agree, and I appreciate that you noticed that.
I tweeted one of your tapes when you tell about the nefarious Benton Tate and.
Well, we could have a separate conversation about that. Yeah, weed. Yeah, if his background isn't enough,
you know
to
what the
make you
leprechaun
suspicious.
says? The leprechaun says, "A friend with weed is a friend indeed, but a friend with gold is the best I'm told." Me gold,
Okay,
me gold.
but
That was on St. Patrick's Day. Ron Paul was widely compared to the leprechaun. Lep in the hood, out to do no good.
Well, I don't know if you want to get into this, but one of the things that I've heard as a suggestion about Jesse Benton is that he was actually sent. That the reason he was cheating on a woman when he first hooked up with Ron Paul's granddaughter, Valerie, and married her in order to work his way into Ron Paul Inc. And that's pretty obvious in and of itself, but that he was actually sent by an outside agent that is why he's got Trygve V. Olsen in on the campaign in order to take the teeth out of the foreign policy part of Ron Paul's message. Do you have any insight or opinion on that?
I would say about this. I have seen published sources online, which I have not been able to verify, but they seem plausible, that Ron Paul is the champion nepotist of the House and the Senate. In other words, of all the congressmen and senators right now, he is the greatest expert on getting his own relatives on the payroll. And that would include, apparently, the figure I saw was 61 people. 61 of his relatives are either on his congressional office payroll or his campaign payroll. And that would be Benton married to his granddaughter. But I think in a larger sense, the entire purpose of his campaign is to secure a future for Rand. And Rand, Rand is out there campaigning for Romney right now, even as we speak, right? And he's made statements in favor of Romney, which amount to endorsements. And therefore, the problem that I think is tragic for the people that are here is so many of them have bought into this Ron Paul hysteria, and they're ignoring the obvious facts in the case. Now, let's bring it right down here to the Bilderberger. Peter Thiel, Thiel, or Herr Thiel, is a member of the steering committee of Bilderberg. I would say he's even more than a member of the steering committee. I think he represents the next generation of the degeneracy of this group. In other words, you have people like David Rockefeller, Kissinger, Zbigniew Brzezinski, Lecomte d'Avignon, right, the European branch. These guys, they're old. They're going to be gone soon. Who's going to take over this stuff, and what will that represent? I think there's a generation of young predators who are more sociopathic than the older ones because they have no experience of war, they have no experience of the Cold War, they have no understanding of a world without derivatives, right? They think for them derivatives and the internet are like daily bread. Thiel is famous for a number of things, right? He gives young kids money to drop out of college, which I think is criminal. I mean, if you were a parent, if you know what this means, to sacrifice for decades of your life to put your kid through college, and then along comes Thiel and says, here's $5,000, kid, go drop out. Right?
Well, you really think that the modern government-supervised propaganda system is something that anybody should subject their children to?
Come on. Enough with the talking points. If you go to college and you're smart, you can always get a good education. You can learn languages, right? Those are objectively valid. You can always do something with a college education. And the other thing is, if you want to compete in a labor market, since we're so market-oriented here, market radicals, you're unemployable without a college degree.
Okay, well, let me sit back and introduce you. This is Webster Tarpley. We're here at Bilderberg, Occupy Bilderberg 2012, and I'm very excited to have an opportunity to sit down with you because, as you said, we are a bunch of market extremists here, and you're an exception to that. And you have such an incredible ability of analysis and insight. And I had you on my TV show back in the day, and I'm excited to have an opportunity to interview you now for YouTube. But if you would step back and tell us a bit about how your philosophical perspective is different from...
I got to get to the point because I got to tell you not what you want to hear, but what you need to know.
All right.
So Thiel is out there encouraging kids to drop out. The other thing that he wants to do is to have these offshore floating extraterritorial
The Seasteading Institute project.
Okay, seasteading. Now, I just speculate, what could that mean? Right? If there's no government and no laws, what might one have? Well, how about slavery, prostitution, narcotics, child labor, no minimum wage, no health care, right? You could die.
Are you against people being able to put what they want in their own bodies? Are you against, I mean, as George Carlin would say,
Come on.
fucking is legal, selling is legal, why isn't selling fucking legal?
I don't want to...
No, but you're raising those as objections to the libertarian communities that he's working on providing. And I would say that there are legitimate things to criticize Peter Thiel for as a member of the superclass, as a participant in Bilderberg, that while he made his wealth in the market, it was not the free market. He was a beneficiary of corporatism and all sorts of government policies that made him much wealthier than he would be otherwise.
Again, I would like to stick to the point, which is Thiel is an exponent of neo-feudalism. In other words, it's in the United States, it's still a fairly strong state. If you want to begin the subversion of the United States into mini-states, micro-states, secessionism, the destruction of society, you can start with a kind of a pilot project offshore, and then that corrosive poison would then spread, among other things.
Wait, so you would say that the central authority that we have in the United States today is good?
I'm pleased to listen to your objections, but I can't get into.
You throw out too much red meat for me. I love having these conversations with you because of that.
I can't go into the Milton Friedman, all the complete works of Milton Friedman or whatever it is you want. That seasteading business is a concrete example of the neo-feudalism that the Bilderberger group represents. These people are enemies of the modern state. Their idea is the IMF and NATO over a regionalized world of petty states, micro-states. Soros calls it partition studies, how the existing nation states will be carved.
Is he advocating for that?
Yeah, of course. I mean, that's the current U.S. policy. But now look,
Soros is advocating for that?
The connection is that this Peter Thiel has given $2.7 million to Ron Paul's campaign in the form of a super PAC. Yep. That by itself, it seems to me, ought to throw a whole bunch of people into a kind of cultural and moral crisis that the hated oligarchs of the Bilderberger group, right, execrated correctly in all the world, they're paying for something with Ron Paul. What are they paying for? Two things. One is the spreading of ideological poison. In other words, to make Ron Paul's Restore America economic program, to make that presentable implies a huge downshift in the morality and intelligence of the American people. The kind of stuff that Ron Paul has would have been laughed out of the room in the 1950s. It would have been barbaric. It would have been a relic of the barbaric and primitive past. So,
unless your name was Goldwater.
Ron Paul is, which he did, right? Which he was spreading, right? And he was, justly defeated. So Ron Paul is spreading the poison. The other thing, of course, with Ron Paul is Ron Paul was a kind of an auxiliary to the Romney campaign. Very clear. In the Republican primaries, you're going to have 40% country club establishment voters, neocons, whatever. And then you're going to have 50 or 60% of anti-establishment Tea Party, whatever they are. The danger to Romney was that he could get a significant part of the 40%, but there was always the danger that the rest of them would unite around some rival. What Ron Paul did was to take 10, 15, sometimes 17% of the vote and put them in the deep freeze, right? Put them, essentially lock them up where the sun doesn't shine, because this is a candidate who could never be the Republican nominee and who could never be president. But the effect that he had was to take them off the table. So instead of, Santorum, I mean, there were a couple of, like the Ohio primary and the Wisconsin, I think, where Santorum was defeated by Romney by a very small majority. That's essentially Ron Paul helping Romney over the hump, because a lot of those people radicalized.
By taking a chunk away from Santorum?
Yeah, in other words, by locking those votes up where Santorum could never get them. Then there's a deeper level, right? Ron Paul represents the Scottish Rite Southern jurisdiction of Freemasonry, right? The old Confederates, the Dixiecrats. Romney represents Mormonism, which is, I would call it a kind of Freemasonry with a veneer of religiosity over the top. The one thing that they have in common is anti-black racism, right? We know Ron Paul's newsletters. These cannot be denied. And then we have in the Mormon the Book of Mormon, the idea is that the black population of the earth are the descendants of the people who sided with Lucifer in the great contest between Lucifer and Jesus, and that planet Kobold or Kolob or wherever it is. So this is all a very cynical thing. Now, the verification of this would have been if Romney had needed Ron Paul's delegates to go over the top to get the 1144, he would have had them. And
but we won't see that at this point, is what you're saying.
I don't think we will, because Romney has made it sort of on his own. But at that point, the swindle that would have been carried out would have been to say, okay, Romney's going to get these votes. He's going to put Rand Paul on there as vice president, and therefore delegates, Ron Paul would make an appeal to his delegates, come out and support my little son. He's such a wonderful guy, and all this stuff. And the son, Rand Paul made pilgrimages, according to published sources, to meet William Crystal of the Weekly Standard, to pledge that he would not be doctrinaire and reject a war with Iran, but he would be open to a war with Iran.
Well, and as he's shown, he already voted for the sanctions, which was the first act of war against Iran.
He votes for economic warfare. So I think this is tragic. And in 2008, my function was to say to people, stop Obama. Don't believe Obama. It's a fraud. Don't be duped. And now it's similar. It's a somewhat more limited phenomenon, but still, it's a phenomenon that tends to take a lot of people out of circulation who would have been valuable. In other words, who would have been exactly the people you need for serious organizing. It basically brings them back to the Republican Party. You can see Rand Paul, when he made his de facto endorsement of Romney, he said, oh, my dad, he's been building the Republican Party, right? And he's got a lot of people, a lot of you guys are registered Republicans now, where after Bush, maybe you were like me, after Bush I said, I'll never vote for another Republican in 5,000 years. And they said, oh, that's sectarian. I said, all right, 3,000 years. I won't vote for a Republican for 3,000 years. That would have been a good resolution for you guys to make. So I think this is a swindle. This is a controlled opposition. You've got to grasp this. I know it hurts.
Well, now you're not suggesting that are you suggesting that it's deliberate on Ron's part to play into this, or that he's being promoted as controlled opposition because he is creating something that is controllable?
Yeah, I mean, to psychoanalyze him, I wouldn't know how to do that. But I would just point to one thing, right? Why is this important? You look at that Restore America plan, right? The savage cuts, the $1 trillion of cuts, right? The Pentagon budget gets cut 15%, which is what Obama's doing already. Obama cuts plus automatic sequester minus 15%. So Ron Paul is giving you no extra Pentagon cuts, but he wants to cut food stamps by 62 to 63%. So right now, food stamps might be average, according to Chef Mario Batali, $31 a week per person per week. So that's about $1.50 per meal. With Ron Paul's cuts, it would go down to 58 cents per person per meal. 58 cents for a meal. Now that's going to be beans, spaghetti. That's a recipe for rickets, pellagra, scurvy. I call him Pellagra Paul because his program will inflict pellagra. And that means genocide against the American people. And this is where I draw the line. My whole activity is I'm trying to defend anybody against genocide, and all the more so, I got to try to defend the American people against economic genocide. Now, you look at the Supreme Court, the way it's lining up. You look at the election, the way it's lining up. I think the U.S. ruling class and the British are interested in a hard right, quasi-fascist turn. They want to say, not only is there no Obamacare, we'll have an obiter dictum, right, when they add what they want to say. There's no Medicare, there's no Medicaid, there's no unemployment benefits, there's no Head Start, there's no S-chip. You're going to die. In other words, we're stripping away all of your gains from centuries of labor struggles and political struggles. The economic rights of the American people are going to be stripped away. And I know you guys believe the American people don't have any economic rights, and that's where we come to the parting of the way.
Where would you think that we don't believe individuals have economic rights? Because that's what we champion.
No right to health care. you have no right. You have no economic rights.
Okay, well, let's get to the heart of the issue here, because there's so many things in what you said that I'd love to address, so many specific things I'd like to defend from the libertarian perspective, but I do want to bring it back to Bilderberg, but I'll use one of the things you said to make a point first. You said that, first of all, that Bilderberg is the enemies of the current system of government, and while they might not find it optimal...
They're transforming. It's always transforming, right? They're always degrading. They're always, downshifting. They always want people to be stupider, governments
exactly.
to be weaker,
I would say
oligarchs to be stronger, neo-feudalism to come along. Just in terms of the ideology, David Rockefeller, the honcho in here, was tutored by von Hayek. Mm-hmm. And David Rockefeller financed von Mises. Now that means your holy books are essentially a Bilderberger creation from beginning to end. I go with John Quincy Adams, Lincoln, Hamilton, FDR, Kennedy. Those are not controlled.
Well, we don't have holy books in the libertarian movement. We have holy ideas. We have sacred principles. We have the non-aggression principle. We have the self-ownership. Well, see, now you're making more appeals to authority. And in the age of the internet, we reject those. Our appeals are to logic and reason and evidence, not to authority.
Cults. Believe me, I've seen enough of personality cults.
I'm not saying that we don't have personality cults within the movement. Absolutely we do. But the principles behind the libertarian message are in direct contradiction to that, and we don't have sacred books. We have sacred ideas. We have sacred principles. But hold on, sure. But let me get to the crux of the issue here, because you said that Ron Paul's proposed cuts were savage cuts, and you said that what Peter Thiel, by creating voluntary societies, truly free, governmentless societies, would be creating openings for immorality, as you said, slavery and prostitution and drug use and things like that. Right, of course, but it's what do people want? And what I would say is that what we have now, the source of all those funds, you say it's savage to cut government spending. I think what's more savage is when you have the government saying, you people can't figure out how to do these things without force and violence. You guys can't figure out how to address poverty. You can't figure out how to get along in a free society. We have to impose some system by a central authority, by force and violence. And if anything, the people here at Bilderberg are the beneficiaries of government. But this is no. This is an important philosophical crux in the difference here from libertarianism and statism. Anytime you say that we need government for something, because government is force, government is violence, what you are saying is we give up on creating a peaceful way of solving this problem. We give up on a voluntary, cooperative way of addressing this issue. We are simply going to have a vote. We are going to elect people. We are going to have somehow the majority will imposed by force on the minority, or as is inevitably the product of constitutional government, as we've seen in the United States, we end up with a minority oligarchy, like here at Bilderberg, that gets to use government to impose its will on people because we accept this idea that we need rulers. We couldn't possibly, as a society, figure out how to get along. These aren't abstractions. These are real things.
Here's concrete. In the United States right now, you got 50 to 60 million people. They are there thanks to Bill Clinton, first of all, because Bill Clinton destroyed welfare.
Wait, 50 to 60 who what?
Million people who are in extreme dire poverty. And they are there because Bill Clinton, to get himself reelected, destroyed welfare, one of the titles of the Social Security Act of 1935. He began the process of stripping away the economic rights of the American people, the right not to be destitute. If you're destitute, a society full of destitute people is on its way to a dictatorship. And don't tell me the libertarian litany about that. The 50 to 60 million people are in dire poverty. We found the statistics came out during the course of the first half of the year, right? How many people are in dire poverty? They don't have health care. They can't afford it. A lot of them are on the verge of starvation. They are saved by food stamps. There are now almost 50 million people on food stamps. Anybody who proposes to cut the food stamp budget by 2/3, or just about, in that kind of a depression, is proposing genocide against the American people. Now, when I see genocide, I say, never again. I'm sorry. Never again to anybody, and least of all to the American people. Well, I think that's the heart of the matter. Now, don't tell me about voting and force and violence and all this stuff. The act of violence carrying out here is to make people starve to death by proposing to cut off their food stamps, which are wretched enough, believe me.
So you don't think that the imposition of taxation by force, that the extraction of the wealth from the American people, that is an excuse for, is more responsible for that poverty? You don't think that the government has anything to do with creating these problems?
Look, you got to tell me, if I kill a significant part of the 50 million who are now living on food stamps, you got to tell me how that helps anybody. How does that make anything better? Oh, it solves the deficit. Yeah, that's the method that.
Okay, well, let me ask you then a more hypothetical question.
Yeah, I know you want to be.
Because you want that, of course. No. Do the American people want to take care of people who are starving in this country? Do the American people, out of the goodness of their hearts, really do they want to do this?
The concrete issue is the food stamp program, TAMF, right? Temporary Assistance to Needy Families, and SNAP, right? Supplemental Nutritional Assistance Program. Is that going to be funded or not? And if you say no, with everything else remaining the same, right? Ceteris paribus, everything else being equal, that's genocide.
Well, look, just because I
don't care.
hold on. I let you finish now. Give me a minute to have to get my full ideas and rebuttal out. Because just because I'm against the government wiping my ass doesn't mean that I'm for having shit all over it. Just because that we don't want a central authority to impose something doesn't mean that we're against the benefits. No, these are real ideas. Because if you had a people that wanted to take care of poor people, if that wanted the products that government provides that are legitimate services that people want to consume, wouldn't you be able to convince people to go along with this? Wouldn't you be able to convince and persuade people to be a part of the system? Wouldn't it? Well, no, it's a real world where people can actually get together peacefully and create superior solutions to ones that, I mean, if your ideas are so anarcho-capitalism, voluntarism, because I have a moral problem with ever using force against someone who is acting peacefully. And if you say that we need government for something, you're saying that it's impossible.
You got a problem with violence?
Genocide?
How about starving? I don't know how many million of those people will die if we cut off their food stamps?
The original crime that was an initiation of force was making them dependent on government in the first place.
Where we are now, in the here and now. How is your Ron Paul 2/3 cut of food stamp budget going to do anything positive except kill a lot of Americans?
Well,
and
now,
as we can see from Germany, 1930 to 32, destroy the economy, destroy the political system, and open the door to fascism. Let me add another one. If you're concerned about totalitarianism, okay, and I am, you got to realize the only way you fight totalitarianism is to have powerful mass organizations. And among these, some of the most important are trade unions. Now,
I thought powerful organizations were a form of totalitarianism.
No, if you're going to fight a totalitarian state, suppose somebody seizes power in Washington and tries to create a totalitarian government. It's happening.
Like Obama?
Huh? No, I'm talking more like Hitler, let's say. If you get a Hitler comes to power in Washington, how can you stop him? You call a general strike. You got to fight. You got to have an open-ended general strike with demonstrations and all the rest, political strikes. Who could do that? Unions could do that. And now along come Ron Paul and Rand Paul saying, oh yeah, we're for liberty, but in the meantime we're going to destroy the only organizations that have a prayer of preventing totalitarian rule.
You raise a valid point, and let me get to the heart of this, which is what does the libertarian message do to address poverty? And I think we can at least agree
dictatorship,
that
genocide.
We address dictatorship and genocide by condemning all of the immoral initiations of force that underpin those philosophies, those ideas that make that possible. But no, this is really
consoling word.
This is but this is important.
They need their food stamps, my friend. They need to eat something.
They need government. They need government. They absolutely are dependent on systems of violence. No,
that's all that's left.
Well, Webster, are you going to give me a minute to actually address this? Are you going to give? Come on, man.
I like their ambition is that when
I've got the mic, you're not even being picked up. Come on, man.
That's all there is. Then you damn well better have food stamps. Yes, rather than genocide.
Okay, well this now
anything is better than genocide.
And I'm not going to address this in terms of the Ron Paul plan, because again, right there, you're making an appeal to authority for something specifically, because I'm advocating something different. But there is a principle that he has discussed, which is that we need to cut foreign aid first. That when you re-empower the American economy, and you would agree with this, by eliminating the the unnecessary foreign military spending and foreign aid, that people on average will be much more prosperous here in the United States, will be much more able to address the issue of poverty. No, but first we do that, then we address that issue. But here's the crux of this, is that the system that we have today that keeps people dependent on welfare is holding people back from real economic opportunity, from real economic development. And what we should do is address this. And I don't want, no, but the reason that we don't have jobs is because government makes it too expensive to employ people with regulations and taxation and the minimum wage. But if
That's Chamber of Commerce rhetoric, huh? You sound like a reactionary Republican of the 1930s.
Except that I'm a voluntarist anarcho-capitalist, and we're moving forward to a new paradigm.
A libertarian is a reactionary Republican, maybe with some narcotics thrown in and a little bit of wild stuff, right?
Come on, Webster. I thought you'd have a slightly more respect for the seriousness of the philosophy that we're proposing and discussing here.
This, if you call von Hayek and Mises a philosophy, this is the lowest dreck of the failed economists of the world, right? And again, in the 50s and 60s, this stuff it would have been laughed out of any serious discussion. It was so primitive. It was the language of the Chamber of Commerce, the reactionary businessman, the union buster, Father Coughlin, or
I have some bad news for you. This is the language of the future. This is the way people who grew up with the internet are looking at government. This is the way that people who have no tolerance for the kind of problems that exist for lack of information have as an attitude towards the world. Because we look at the world dominated by government. We look at the underlying causes. We ask why, and we don't stop asking why. And when you ask why about government, you never get any good, satisfactory answers. And in your case, what you're saying and advocating for a government welfare state, saying when we say, why do you need a system of force? Why do you need to take money from people at the barrel of a gun? You have to force the system of taxation in order to do that, because you cannot convince them that the government system is going to be the most effective way to take care of poor people, that private charity isn't more efficient, more effective, more moral, and more sustainable. That has always been the case. But more importantly, we believe in the free market ideal that is two individuals exchange goods and services just as we are right now. There's no force and coercion here, except when I take the mic away from you. And we're able to exchange without force, fraud, or coercion. And any time you introduce that, where we think that we're benefiting for mutual benefit, or we're interacting for mutual benefit, anytime you introduce force into the equation, one person doesn't benefit. One person is a victim. And what you are doing is taking away that capitalist ideal that humanity has the ability to achieve anything through the market, through peaceful, voluntary cooperation. And anytime you introduce force into that, you are taking away that potential. And the people today that are here, that grew up with the internet, the youth in America that sees the potential, don't accept any of these justifications that you put forth for more government, for a welfare state, because we know that when you entrust a system that has the power to, by either representative government or by majority vote, somehow force its will on a minority of dissenters, not only are you violating those basic moral principles, but you're creating the avenue to tyranny that allows for the Bilderberg group that we're here protesting to exist in the first place.
The avenue to tyranny is the destruction of all unions and the kind of austerity. If you want to see what Hitler came from, he came from an austerity program very similar to Ron Paul's, the Bruning years from 1930 to 1932. Look, you got all this wild spinning rhetoric. There are 50 million Americans that have to have dinner tonight. What's your proposal?
I'm not for immediate. No, I'm not for abolishing it immediately. No, and you're talking about the Ron Paul plan, and you're mistaking Ron Paul for the message of liberty. He is not. He is someone who has taken the philosophy and done his best to embodiment in a practical form to reduce government violence, applying it to the immediate problems of government. And under his plan, and you should have more respect for this, he has said we end foreign military spending, and then we find a way to phase out, without pulling the rug out from underneath anybody, the domestic welfare spending here at home.
That's what he says. But see, Ron Paul has committed a tremendous mistake by putting this Restore America on the internet. I urge everybody, look at that Restore America.
His specific plan, you mean?
It's a detailed budget plan for how to cut $1 trillion from the federal budget in 1 year, and it spells genocide. And the 62% cut in the food stamps, he wants to cut WIC. How about WIC? It's about $2 or $3 billion. WIC is high protein meals for expectant mothers. And it has to be, those meals have got to be there now, because the babies are going to come into the world. If they don't get enough protein, they're going to have cognitive impairment their whole lives. So you have all of this crazy rhetoric, right? All of this, it's really Bentham, right? It's Bentham and John Stuart Mill and a whole bunch of British East India Company claptrap. What's left is the American people are in agony, and your only proposal is to strip them. I notice you didn't talk about anything with class consciousness. You didn't say we're going to expropriate the rich predators of Wall Street. We're going to tax Wall Street turnover. We're going to shut down the speculators.
This is a good point, and I will say that this is one legitimate weakness of the libertarian philosophy, is that it does not completely, to everyone's satisfaction, address the existing concentrations of wealth and power that are the product of the government-managed market. But what we are saying is that we are making the conscious choice that we would rather deal with that peacefully than violently. Now, you are saying that we might have a genocide, and you use that term in terms of what would happen if we cut welfare here in the United States, that Americans are so heartless that we would simply let people die on the streets. But I don't know if you noticed, Webster. I don't know if you noticed, but there is already some widespread death going on at the hands of the government that is justified by your saying that we need it for the welfare state. And despite the public's will being so against the wars in Iraq and Afghanistan, they continue to this day. The genocide of our current foreign policy and the global war on terror continues, despite the American people being against it, even though the American people think, well, we're just going to have the government to do this limited good work with welfare, with food stamps.
Ron Paul voted for the Afghanistan war. Ron Paul voted for the 9/11 resolution.
You're confusing Ron Paul, the man with the message of liberty. That's not what we're talking about.
You're a moving target now. In other words, if it's not Ron Paul, then who is it, right? And I'm glad you're distancing.
Well, I'm here to talk about ideas. I'm here to talk about philosophy.
Yeah, it seems like it's very convenient to retreat into abstractions when the concrete manifestation. It reminds me
the concrete manifestation is Bilderberg Group. The concrete manifestation is the ongoing occupations of Iraq and Afghanistan. The evidence before us is the drone strikes that continue every single day. That is the byproduct of saying that we need government to take care of us. We need government to make us safe. We need to grant someone an arbitrary authority. That is what opens the door for tyranny. And if you think that we don't have that today, you're the one living in a fantasy world. If you're thinking that if we just get government correct, if we just do it right, then we'll have everything okay. No, it is in the nature of government that makes the current governmental democide that we are experiencing today possible. And it's made possible because there are enough people that agree with you who think that we need government to keep us safe and to provide welfare state.
By 2/3. You're supporting, what do you say? You're supporting Ron Paul's program to cut food stamps by 2/3? No.
I don't think it's perfect, but I think it's a move in the right direction. Absolutely.
How much would you cut?
Well, I wouldn't cut any immediately. I'd cut the foreign spending, and what I would do is localize it. My plan, instead of saying we're going to cut it, we're going to localize the income and the output of those programs to the state level. I think empowering local communities rather than a central authority to have a greater say in how we use government to take care of the impoverished no, not block grant it. You stop taxing the states and you let the states decide how they're going to fund those.
All right, look.
Why do we need a central authority to do this? Why do we need the federal government not? Here's the question. Why do we need government at the federal level and not to do things that can't be done at the state level? What can't be done?
It can be, but if they're not done at some level, I don't care what level they're done at. This whole, your reading of the Constitution, I think you're reading the Confederate Constitution and not the U.S. one. Or maybe
I haven't cited the Constitution yet.
This stuff about what level with all these things. The point is,
well, I'd like to see it all the way down to the community level, down to the city level, down to the family and individual level, and have people actually be in charge of their own lives. But the way that we transition out of this system of central authority and statism that makes all of this democide and Bilderberg superclass possible,
a system of social Darwinism and the survival of the fittest, where rich oligarchs can thrive at the expense, they can act out their sociopath natures against working people with no protections, no...
Wait. Are you describing the libertarian vision, or are you describing Bilderberg?
The union busting. Well, these are now rapidly merging, aren't they? With, I would say, Thiel, to get back to something concrete.
Yes.
With these older guys, Rockefeller, David, and Kissinger, and Zbigniew, and Davignon, they're basically on their way out of the picture. The new generation of Bilderberg, I would say he's the leader of the anarcho-capitalist faction in there, and that will be the destruction of the social safety net such as it still exists, and the imposition of let's say, another 25% cut in the American standard of living, in addition to what they've done already. And the libertarians will be applauding that. In other words, the libertarians will be shock troops. They'll be the Sturmabteilung for that kind of austerity, as we've seen with the Tea Party and so forth.
Well, let's bring it back to Bilderberg. Do you think it could be possible that sure? Do you think it could be possible that Peter Thiel is like a fig leaf, a cover? Because we know that the real conspiring, the real colluding happens not with everybody here, but with the select few in the hallways.
He's on the steering committee. He's not just somebody who wandered in to promote his presidential campaign or whatever it is, right? There are people who come to this because they think they can gain something from it, right? They're not devoted to the ideas. But when you look at some of the people that I've been mentioning in Thiel is on the steering committee.
So what is it that he's looking to benefit from specifically? What is it you think that are Thiel's interests?
That Ron Paul spreads the ideological poison of this libertarianism, right, quite effectively. He dupes a lot of kids with his Leprechaun Act. And at the same time, he's the right wingman for Romney to get Romney in, because ultimately they wanted Romney. And they had made that decision. Look, we're here at the Marriott Hotel. Does that tell you anything? Marriott, Romney, Huntsman, they're all Mormons, okay? So the Mormons own the hotel. It's a Romney event. It's not an Obama event, right? Obama was the enemy of yesterday. Time to lift and shift, people. Romney is the new enemy. Rand Paul is campaigning for him. Ron Paul is his right-wing man. And what it shows is the inherent duplicity of what is called libertarianism. In other words, the deep dishonesty of this entire system of belief, which is claiming to be libertarian, but it's a creature of David Rockefeller. Goes back to David Ricardo, who was on the head of he was one of the people on the board of the British East India Company, and in that capacity, he became an apostle of libertarianism.
Okay, so it couldn't be that the internet is waking people up. It's just Ron Paul duping people. No, I want to ask you one last question. Normally, I start my interviews with this, but I want to give Webster Tarpley here a chance to bring us back to a note of unity about why we're here today, and tell us why it's important for you to be here and bring attention to the Bilderberg meeting.
Yeah, my goal here is to break the power of finance capital in the world, and to denounce them and to expose their program and what their actual deliberations are. I think they're picking Romney over Obama. They're going to be interested in seeing who's the vice presidential candidate. They want to see them. They don't have omnipotent power, but they have a lot of money, a lot of influence, a lot of press, so it makes quite a difference. The other questions they have: what are you going to do about Russia with Putin? What are you going to do about China now that the Bo Xilai coup has failed? Is there some hope for a color revolution brought on by these guys in either Russia or China? What about the BRICS? The Brazil, Russia, India, China, South Africa. They've got a BRICS development bank coming. That's a real threat to the dollar. What are they going to do about that? These people here are the masterminds of the attack on the euro. The attack on the euro is completely planned in London and in Wall Street to save the dollar as a reserve currency. The problem that they have right now is Syriza, right? This wonderful movement, which I recommend people look at. You want to see somebody who's actually fighting for humanity. Alexis Tsipras of the Syriza movement, the left bloc, right? Roll back austerity, no wage austerity, no pension austerity, rehire the government workers, stop the anti-worker union busting fascist measures of the IMF, social justice, arrest bankers who have been part of the embezzlement and so forth in the run-up to the crisis, and debt moratorium. In other words, Greece cannot pay this debt. They're going to have a debt moratorium like, Brazil, Mexico, Argentina, 35 other countries have done it. That's what they're going to need. So that's the action. In other words, people in this country have said, we got the left anarchists with ad busters at the Occupy, and we've got Peter Graeber and Julian Assange and the whole crew of left anarchists. And then we've got the right-wing anarchists who are going with Ron Paul. So you're supposed to choose between that gang and that counter gang. And I say no, you need something that looks much more like Syriza, class-conscious, fighting demands, break the power of the bankers with a direct attack. And that's Alexis Tsipras is going to become the Prime Minister of Greece sometime in the month of June. He's gone from 4% to 30%. He's showing everybody how it's done, how you do it. And the way you do it is not ad busters and culture jamming and this other garbage. It's organization. He's melding together 12 components into his block. He's got a leader, it's him, and he's hanging tough. He's got a strategy, which is don't give in to the IMF, and he's got a program, which is the 5 points that I just went through. By the way, you look at my website, I got 5 points.
And what's your website?
Tarpley.net. Okay? So that's the thing that leads out of the crisis. In other words, a New Deal for Europe. Break the power of finance capital. Now, what they're talking about here is, should they have a coup in Athens or not? Are they going to have a coup to try to avoid, before this election or after the election? What are they going to do? Are they going to try, God knows, violent solutions, wet work? That's typical for these characters. Like political assassination is their stock in trade, right? And it goes against all sorts of people you wouldn't expect. What else are they talking about? Are they going to attack Syria and or Iran in the immediate weeks ahead, right after this whole...
Just as an aside, would you say that the independent media is providing some limit on what they think they can get away with, and in a way restricting their power by providing some form of oversight, as limited as it is, that when they say we should have a war with Iran, well, maybe we should instead have a humanitarian war with Syria, because we can't get away with this absurd just propaganda over and over. People are seeing through it in regards to Iran, that the independent media is having some effect in that sense.
It has some effect, but I wouldn't be so optimistic. I would be rather pessimistic, and I would say the following. If you want to exercise political power, you need an organization. And this is where the libertarian mindset fails completely. The libertarian mindset fails because there's no understanding that political power grows out of organization, not out of the barrel of a gun or any other nonsense, out of mass organization and class consciousness. That is where power resides. And if you're not willing to go down that route, you can hope for the best. But all of this independent media didn't stop the attack on Libya. It hasn't. It hasn't. It has failed to do a whole bunch of things that it needed to do.
Well, I'll get right on planning that central authoritarian-based plan for achieving liberty, and then the libertarians can take over the world and leave everyone alone.
You're ignoring the existence of a world economic depression of awesome proportions.
Well, we're not ignoring that, but I was going to wrap up with that, man.
The threat of genocide is inherent. It's built into this current situation. Anybody proposing austerity cuts is not only a class traitor, but is essentially going along with the program of finance capital, which is the guys that we have here at the Bilderberg. And that's again where the libertarian view, right, does it mean you have to be a scab and a strikebreaker and an enemy of mass struggle, and you want to strip the American people of their economic rights? I'm afraid in practice that's what it often means. And then of course you get some rhetoric about anti-war, but if Romney is benefiting from Ron Paul, Romney is the biggest warmonger. He thinks Russia is the main enemy of the United States. He says the option to attack Iran should not be on the table but in my hand, says Romney. And now with a vote for Ron Paul, you're supporting that. Just remember, a vote for Ron Paul in the primaries has been a vote for Romney.
All right, so here it is, the final last word of this interview. I'm really grateful for the time. It's been fascinating. You have an incredibly acute mind, and I really appreciate you taking the time. Your last chance, any last words to all the internet libertarians out there that might be watching this?
What you could usefully do, as I said, probably the easiest thing to do is get out there and denounce and discredit the Hula massacre in Syria. This was done by NATO death squads. It's very clear. It was Al-Qaeda and Salafists, terrorists, coming into Hula. They burned down the hospital. They massacred everybody coming out of the hospital. They even brought cadavers from other sites. This is basically, it's modeled on Hitler's Gleiwitz radio station false flag of 1939 that started World War II. Up to now, the situation in Syria has been, a lot of it looks like Czechoslovakia, right? The way the destabilization of Czechoslovakia, but that didn't really lead to a war. It led to the destruction of the country. Now we're into the examples that look much more like Poland, which is where World War II actually started. So don't believe that Hula massacre. Get on Twitter and elsewhere and counterattack that mass brainwashing. Right now there's this drill going on, right? Operation Eager Lion 12. Eager Lion 12 is 17 countries, 12,000 troops. It's in Jordan, mainly U.S. and NATO, some Egyptian, some Pakistani. That is essentially the drill that would go live to attack Syria. So support, in contrast to Ron Paul, get out there and campaign for the Walter Jones resolution, right, that tells Obama, if you attack anybody, you'll be impeached. At least.
But that was awesome to see Walter Jones submit the bill to impeach Obama.
Yeah, I was amazed that Ron Paul, didn't build it into his stump speech. He didn't do anything with it. I think he finally grudgingly became a co-sponsor, right? But he doesn't do anything that might embarrass Mitt. He's there for Mitt. You gotta see that, right? Everything comes down to Mitt and Rand. Mitterrand, right? Sounds like a French president. So stop the attack on Syria. I would say that's the main thing, say, in the next week or two.
Ladies and gentlemen, Webster Tarpley, tarpley.net. Check the link below.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. No, that was really blessed. Hey, everybody. Who wants their chairs back?
Did I shake anybody's orthodoxy? Huh?